Hello and welcome to the Transformation Project, a podcast and community for women who are looking to transform into the best version of themselves no matter where they are at. A place where you can listen, learn, and laugh along with us as we dive deep into different topics to help you live a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. Remember, we are all learning here together, and therefore the content and opinions of the hosts and our guests should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Transformation Project. In a lot of our recent episodes, we have been talking about the beginning stages of life, about birth, about children. We are flipping the script today, and we are going to be talking about menopause, something that I know is really relevant for me and a lot of my friends at the moment, being in our kind of late 40s. There was only one person I could think of to talk to about this, and that is my friend, Kerry Corp, who is an absolute bomb at the subject. Kerry is a passionate, supportive, integrative health coach. She supports women through their journey from midlife to menopause and the years beyond. Kerry's belief is that health and vitality is something we all deserve at any stage, phase, or age, and that being equipped with a better understanding of what's really going on in our bodies is the key to thriving as we age. So whether in a group or one-on-one session, Kerry takes a holistic approach to coaching, creating positive and healthy habits to ensure pillars of health to support your lifestyle. She is also an author of a cookbook, and I know she's got some more in the works too, which is exciting. So we'll make sure that we share that with you guys as well. But welcome on to the podcast, Kerry.
Oh, thank you so much, ladies. I'm really excited and honoured to be on here, to be asked for one, but secondly, to be talking about this really important subject around women's health that I honestly believe is being neglected for far too long.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. I know so you have done a course within our travel wellness program. So that's I guess for our clients that we all do with our health coaching and our business that we run. We have like a closed group, and Kerry has done within that group some work around this topic. And I was so surprised when sharing it with my clients and even listening to it myself. Just how many people were shocked. I was shocked. A lot of the things that you were discussing were things that I did not know were menopause related at all. And I know certainly it helped a lot of us feel like we weren't losing our freaking minds, but we will get to that. To start off though, I'd really love to know what got you into health coaching and why do you coach women specifically on this midlife to menopause journey?
Well, my journey sort of with health, I've always been interested in eating well and looking after myself, but I was probably not doing that for quite some time, particularly in my 30s. And I was experiencing some health issues, which I just kept ignoring. My former career I had a 30-year career in hairdressing. So, was working very, very long hours on my feet and just really burning the candle at both ends, to be honest, and it was really taking a toll on my health. And then I had my daughter and my health really deteriorated, and I kept asking questions, kept going to see people, and I just wasn't getting answers or help. I was falling into that mystery bracket, if that makes sense. And then I remember a GP that I'd been to see who said to me, Kerry, I don't think that what we offer is really going to help you. I think that all these things are going on for you, but you may need to seek some alternative therapies and, medicines. So I was like, yes, of course, like I'm open to that. So I pursued that, came across someone who completely transformed my health and therefore my life. And I was able to recover from, a pretty debilitating health condition. It's commonly known as leaky gut, but it was much more than just digestive issues.
That's super open-minded of your GP to refer you to.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say that doesn't happen often. Good on that person.
Yeah, I think because I'd been going to this one particular clinic too, and I think she could see this, persistent asking the same question. Something's not right with me. I don't feel right. And anyway, we can go into all of that. But I basically went on this trajectory of change, and it really did transform my life in such incredible positive ways that I just wanted to pursue like learning more. So I actually started studying health coaching purely because I didn't want to go and do a degree in my early 40s. I was like, haven't got time for that. So I came across health coaching, and it was purely from an interest point of view, not to pursue that career. But I loved it so much that I was just like, okay, like, why not? Like, why not pursue it? So I was kind of juggling my hairdressing and that at the same time. And then we moved and relocated from Melbourne to the Surf Coast. And I saw that as an opportunity to really embrace it a lot more and give away hairdressing. And, I was in my mid-40s, so started noticing some pretty significant changes going on in my body, and had to kind of really re-educate myself again in what I needed to do at this time of life. And I was really, really gobsmacked by how little we do know about this important phase of life, and really what's there to support us. There is information and there is resources out there, but you actually have to be quite a sleuth to go and find it. It's not easily accessible. And it's really interesting because I know I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts all around menstruation, and that was really interesting. And it really is interesting because, like, we talk about the 3 Ps that women go through, which is when we get our periods, when and if we become pregnant, and then in perimenopause. And we have enormous amount of information and support with, menstruation and getting pregnant. Like, there's just, so much support and resources thrown at you. That's kind of, we get to this phase of life and it's just like, oh yeah, you're just going through the change. You're going to have hot sweats and bad moods.
I feel like it's almost like been up until now kind of perceived as like an embarrassing thing.
I was going to say taboo. That's what
yeah,
I was.
It's like a taboo thing. It's like, I don't want, like, people don't want to talk about menopause or admit they're going through menopause because I don't know why. Like, does it feel like you're getting old, or like you're actually a real human being that does stuff?
And,
I don't know.
And that's really true. Like, one of the side effects of it is that a lot of women say that they actually start to feel invisible because they feel like they have to keep it inside, and they don't understand what's going on in their bodies. Like, they know that they're going through a change and there's this shift in them, but they actually don't understand it. And I think that that really needs to change. And it is slowly changing, but with anything, it takes time. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, when I was sort of exploring it, I'm like, this needs to be, talked about. We need to break this taboo of secrecy and all of this stuff, not only amongst women, but just in general society, like with our, like, I talk about it with my partner, I talk about it with my daughter, they even joke about it now. Every time I knock myself, they're like, oh, Mum, that's perimenopause or something like that. But like, they're more comfortable in talking about it and getting that education understanding, which then helps us go through it. And, I just believe that education is really important around this subject, and on all levels, because even if we talk about the medical profession, talk about you go to the GP or whatever, even they're not as knowledgeable in that field because they're not trained enough in that area. And look, there's lots of reasons why, and we're not going to get into the history of medical research and the lack thereof in women's health, but it really is an area that needs to be supported so much more because it's a very significant phase of life for women. It really is. It's enormous.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you say that about the research, because I just read, I forget what the book was called, but it was about Real Food for Pregnancy. That's what the book was called. And she talks about how lots of these studies just in general, anything about nutrition, are predominantly around men or postmenopausal women
Correct.
because obviously they're not getting a period, they're not on a cycle, their hormones aren't fluctuating. They're a bit more like a man in that sense, and therefore the research is easier. And so she was complaining about that. So it's very interesting, that you say that. But do you mind explaining the differences, I guess, between perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause?
Right. So there's actually 3 phases of menopause. So perimenopause is the years leading up to that one day, which is menopause. So menopause is actually only one day. It's 12 months since your last period. So you've got to go 12 months period free to be considered in menopause. And after that 24 hours, you become postmenopausal. And perimenopause is actually the phase where most people are symptomatic, where you really experience those changes and those symptoms. Postmenopause, you still can experience some symptoms, sometimes just for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years after. And then, usually you're kind of, back to what your new normal will be. But some, like a small percentage of women, will still endure some symptoms indefinitely. Like there's some women in their 70s and 80s who can still experience hot flushes, for example.
Yeah.
But perimenopause is those years leading up, and it can be 5 to 10 years. So anyone in their late 30s, early 40s, even if they don't realize it, are actually perimenopausal. So your body, your hormones are already changing, in the sense that what generally happens is progesterone. So your 3 main hormones that are affected the most: progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. And what happens is your progesterone starts to slowly decline, and estrogen fluctuates wildly, like for quite a few years. And that's what causes a lot of the dramatic symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts to really lower and taper off, as does testosterone. But there's also a time when testosterone actually becomes the more dominant hormone. Like there'll be a period of time where that can happen. So, and there's, with each thing, excuse me, there's different symptoms and things that can affect us during those times. So you'll, even in perimenopause, they generally have 3 phases. So you'll have those early years where you're not really noticing, their things are changing, but you're just not aware as much. And then when you're sort of in that mid-perimenopause phase, that's when you start to notice things are just changing. And then that final phase is when it sort of tends to be at its peak, if that makes sense. But it's so interesting, like menopause itself is actually 24 hours. So it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Easy.
In its clinical classification. So, yeah. So most people, when we say you're in perimenopause, it's actually pretty much the majority of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest part. So you were just talking about symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know about hot flashes. I think we've all heard about that.
Yeah.
Hot flashes, not getting your period consistently. What are some other ones?
So you can even get your period more consistently. So I'm one of the lucky 20% who actually get my cycle about every 3 weeks, which is great.
Sounds fabulous.
Lucky you.
Times. But yeah, look, so, and that can happen for quite a long phase, as it has been for me. You can get extremely heavy periods and like quite debilitating periods for some women. Some women that experience minimal symptoms, like about 10 to, I think there's about 20% of women get extreme symptoms. About 10 to 20% get very little, if any, like they just cruise on through. But the majority of us have mild to moderate symptoms. But it can be anything, like we know, as you said, the hot flashes or flushes, depending on where you live in the world. Night sweats, which is really just the night version of hot flushes. And they can be a little bit different, but it's still working. It's the way that estrogen works with the hypothalamus in the brain, which is your internal thermostat. And then you've got like mood swings, which is, commonly known. Anxiety is something that women can experience and have no idea that it's connected to menopause or to perimenopause. Particularly if they've suffered with anxiety or depression before, it can be elevated. But suddenly, like I know women who have never experienced depression or anxiety before in their life, and suddenly it's just, they feel afraid because they've never experienced it, and it's just come out of nowhere. You can have things like migraines. Weight gain is something that a lot of people will struggle with at midlife. There's a lot changing, and that can be for a few different reasons. But then there's I shouldn't say weird, but lesser known symptoms like dizziness and skin irritations, rosacea, low sex drive is something that can really happen a lot for women. Heart palpitations. What else is there? I've just got my list here. Digestive issues. So a lot of women will develop digestive issues that they've never experienced before, or perhaps if they have, it becomes a lot worse. Burning mouth syndrome. There's another one I never even knew existed, but I have a couple of girlfriends who have suffered with that.
Burning mouth?
Burning mouth, yeah. So it's like the tongue burns.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Lots of pelvic floor issues. A lot of women will suffer with a lot of pelvic floor issues at this time. Like estrogen is, or in the form of estradiol, is probably the dominant one that affects us on multiple levels, because we have so many estrogen receptors everywhere in the body, even the brain. So, and brain symptoms like brain fog, forgetfulness, feeling like you've got early onset Alzheimer's or something like that. That's a real thing. It happens at this stage of life, and there's a few reasons why. If you want to hear about that, it's really interesting. But like I talked about the 3 Ps before, your brain actually changes in those 3 phases of life. So when you get your period, when you're pregnant, and when you're perimenopausal, your brain actually goes through massive change. It actually cleans out neural activity that you no longer need. So, for example, if you're going through menopause, you no longer need to know how to raise a small child, because you no longer are post-menopause going to be able to become pregnant. So, like all those little neural connections that you no longer need, it clears that out, and it sort of like uploads new neural activity. So while it's going through that, that's why you're often experiencing these, feeling like you're just losing your mind. I know the other day, I literally thought of something. I ran upstairs and I stood in my bathroom going, I have no idea why I'm here. And it was literally 30 seconds from the thought to that moment, and just had completely forgotten what it was that I was there for.
That is actually one of the when I shared the webinar that we did and the information that we did around menopause at the time, that was one of the things that came up commonly in some of my clients that we shared that with, was this chronic forgetfulness where they were like, I thought I was getting Alzheimer's or something, because I am losing, bits of time where they suddenly will have something in their head and then it's gone, or they'll get somewhere and they have no idea. Like they can't remember the journey, or, whatever, as well as the anxiety and depression, because that was something also that nobody had put 2 and 2 together, that it could be caused by the fact that they were perimenopausal. So,
and it's interesting that the most heavily prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication is prescribed to women between the ages of 45 and 55.
Wow.
I'm not saying that that's a bad thing necessarily. Some people need that. It's a bridge that people do need, but it's very overprescribed, where there are other things that can be better in that treatment for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably something for a lot of women out there. If you're feeling this way, you're not alone. You're not losing your mind. Rest easy. Do you know what I mean? Because I think for a lot of people that go like, I need something like right now. And then if you go to your GP, I guess the majority of your GP's education is going to be around prescribing medication. So that is their answer to the problem. And so that's where the road you're going to end up going down. So just to let you know, you're not crazy. is perfectly normal part of what's going on for you. Please rest assured. But going back to the medication, obviously some of the, especially in the olden days, when I say olden days, not that long ago, but you're going into menopause and immediately you're going to be given hormone therapy. That's just was the presumption, right? Everybody who's going through menopause needs hormone therapy. So what are the myths about hormone therapy? Is it the only treatment option if you are experiencing symptoms? Are there some natural options that people can perhaps look at first?
So HRT, which is the most commonly known hormone replacement therapy, which they call MHT now, so menopause hormone therapy, which was actually fairly new. I can't remember when it actually was released, but it was only in the, like mid-1900s, I think. And it was actually derived from horses, like your pregnant horse or mare's urine. So,
Nice.
which kind of grosses you out. But I think if we knew where a lot of things came from, we'd probably be grossed out. But and then there was this women's health study done, I think in the 90s. And it was, so HRT was prescribed to most women. And for the most part was quite, life-changing. And then they did this women's health study. But when they released that, it was actually incorrect information that was released. And there was a lot of front page scaremongering around breast cancer, etc. And there's also what they call BO or body identical hormones as well, which is made from soy and wild yams, or derived from that. It's still compounded and it still, becomes a pharmaceutical, but that's its derivative. And that is more like, it's basically almost like exactly the same as your natural hormones. So it actually mirrors it quite beautifully. So, but there's still all this scaremongering and fear around that if I take menopause hormone therapy, that I'm going to get breast cancer. Now, not everybody is a candidate for it, but it can be a game changer for anyone. And I will always prefer a more holistic and natural approach. But personally, I'm also not against it. And I have seen it completely transform some people's life. Like if you are really struggling, then it can be really good. So
I think definitely everything has its place.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the tablets are still not that great and a bit more higher risk. And there was also links to blood clots and all sorts of things as well. But you can get it transdermally now. So the bioidentical forms of hormone therapy is transdermal. So it's either from a patch or from a cream. And that actually has no issues with blood clotting, and the percentage or the rate of the risk to breast cancer is incredibly low. So in fact, drinking moderately and regularly has a much higher risk. So it's quite interesting. Like we don't quite have the warning labels around that. But yeah, so it does have its place and it does have its benefits. And it has also, there's a lot of research into it now about the prevention of dementia and osteoporosis for women, which we become much higher risk postmenopausal. In fact, women, we go from some quite low percentage of rates of dementia up to 1 in 3 women postmenopause.
Wow.
So there are benefits around that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say is that it shouldn't be excluded to lifestyle changes. Like I actually honestly believe that this is a time of life for women that's been gifted to really start giving back to ourselves. And a lot of women are struggling more through this transition of menopause because of the way we're living our lives. We're living in much more high-stressed, busy, hectic lives. And we're giving out to everyone. And I mean, they often say, look to your mother and what her experience was with menopause, and that's likely what you're going to go through. I tend to disagree with that now because of the way we're living our lives. And perhaps our diets aren't quite as, wholesome and nourishing as well, and not moving as much as we should be. So like it's really important that we do look, regardless of whether we go down that menopause treatment, protocol, that you don't ignore lifestyle changes. And that's looking at, there's different supplementations that you can do. Most women will benefit from magnesium. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Lara Bryden, who's a naturopath. She's Canadian, but she's married to an Australian who lives in New Zealand or something like that. She's
vegan nations in that house.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my house.
Exactly. But she's written a great book called The Hormone Repair Manual. And I love it because it's so informative, but it gives you really, really handy questions to ask your GP. So you're better equipped, because I know even with my own personal experience, going to the GP and talking about exploring menopause hormone therapy, I was actually telling my GP more about what she knew. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to her. It's just I'm more informed. So if you can be more equipped, if that's the path you want to go to. But she also talks about the importance of, looking at your diet and lifestyle, really changing the way that you're currently living your life, and focusing on self-care, and looking at different supplementations. But she's a big fan of magnesium. And, there are also like different like adaptation herbs that you can take, St. John worts, things like that, which, I'm happy to talk to anybody about if they wanted to explore that. And I know I've got that written in our program. But there are different things you can do, but looking at stress, managing stress and mindset is really important. Driving down inflammation, because high levels of inflammation in the body will elevate your symptoms. So, and really looking at diet too, because insulin resistance becomes a challenge for most women at midlife, if that's something that you haven't managed previously. So, there are multiple things that you really need to look at, and it can be overwhelming, but just looking at it one part at a time. And that's where, a health coach is always fabulous to list with that change.
I agree. I think that's so important, because we tend to, when we start seeing something like this and we start going down this various rabbit holes of lifestyle change and this and that, we look at everything and we're like, right, that's it. Tomorrow, like everything is changing. And you may manage that for like a day or two, and then it's just not sustainable in such a huge, big chunk. And then you immediately have kind of put yourself almost in a position to fail, and then go, oh, well, I can't do it. And you've taken this huge step back, as opposed to working with a health coach or with a program where you can do, we're just going to drink more water right now. Once we kind of get that down, great. We're going to start moving our body a little bit more. Great. Let's add a little bit more veggies in, just one at a time, and kind of building that habit up so that it's actually sustainable and you feel like you're constantly winning, as opposed to just taking on so much and just bow.
Yeah. There's like probably less than 2% of the population that can do that kind of overnight radical kind of transformation. But the most of us, it's slow and steady wins the race is what I'm trying to say, not rins the waste.
Totally. When I listened to your webinar, this is what really hit me. So I'm 32. I've just had my second child. He's a year, and I just got my first period last month. Postpartum, I'm still breastfeeding. And I've been having this like realization the last couple of months, like I am closer to menopause than to when I got my period. Like, I'm done having children. I'm done the second P basically. And I'm not going through perimenopause, but what are some things that you could be doing at my age? Like, I feel like none of my friends are talking about menopause. None. Like, my mom is going through menopause, and that's the only person I would have this conversation with. But what about, like, how important is your health in your late 20s and 30s, let's say?
Yeah, so probably in your late 20s, it's probably not, like, I think at any age, just to be aware of that this will happen. Like, we all know that, or you're going to go through the change or whatever, but you're not really going to be tuned into that. But I think what's really interesting is right up until you hit that 24 hours of being in menopause, you can still get pregnant. It's still possible. it's harder, but it's still possible. So, your conception years aren't over until that moment, really.
I'm just hoping they are. But
well, that's good.
I'm thinking I'm going to have some explaining to do.
I know, trust me, I do not. I'm 51, so I do not want that. But so the question was, which I think is a great question, what can you do? Is I think just start educating yourself, just enough that you're aware. I always say, always tune into your body. Your body's always telling you things. So if you can really tune in to those subtleties that your body is starting to, send those little whispers to you all the time, those little taps on the shoulder, then it just makes you aware that, okay, something's changing in me. Because most women don't know that they're in perimenopause until they're well and truly in it, even in that later phase, because we're too busy worrying over here, about everything else in life, or we tend to just ignore those little signs, which is a classic thing that we do because we're too busy caring for everyone else. So really understanding that these things evolve over time, but just starting to make those modifications, probably around your late 30s, early 40s, looking at ways to really, I can't think of the word, there's my menopause brain, but imbue, like self-care. I don't think that's quite the right word, but I think you know what I mean.
We know where you're going with it.
Yeah. This is what happens with my brain. But, just start really factoring in that. Start thinking, putting the face mask on first and really looking after yourself. Start being aware of lowering inflammation in the body. So, it's not going to guarantee that you won't have symptoms, but it will help lower them.
Yeah.
If you're living someone with high stress, not a really wholesome, nourishing diet, filled with lots of, plants and leafy vegetables, then it's only going to create more inflammation in your body. Things that else you can do is starting in your 40s is start thinking about doing some weight training. That's really important. And that doesn't have to be like lifting heavy weights or anything like that, but just incorporating that, because we actually, from after the age of 35, we start to more rapidly lose muscle mass.
Yeah.
So, and then the older we get and post-menopause, that becomes a much bigger issue. So just doing things like a bit of resistant training, even just using your own body strength, but just factoring in, maybe in your 40s, lessening a bit more of your cardio. Yeah. And increasing a little bit more of sort of like weight training.
It's funny that you say that though, because I feel like every woman that I speak to, I need to lose weight. I'm perimenopausal, so I'll go for a run.
Correct. Yeah.
Usually
and that's what happens. A lot of women, and I did the same thing. I started doing more workouts because I suddenly, it probably didn't help that COVID came along and we were less active and perhaps, indulging in some not so healthy habits more. But, I suddenly put on quite a bit of weight and my body just changed and it felt quite foreign. And that's what a lot of people feel, like they just feel like something feels wrong and it feels different and it doesn't feel like you. So I was like, okay, I've got to up my exercise, and I was doing more, fast-paced walking, cardio and things like that. And it was actually making it worse because it can elevate your stress as well. It can, raise cortisol. One of the things that is actually happening is as your ovaries are, reducing that production and then ceasing production of your progesterone and estrogen, your adrenal glands then take up that job to still produce small amounts of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. Obviously not in the amounts that your ovaries will, but that's going to be its job. So it's taking up another job. So if your levels of stress are high and your cortisol and adrenaline is high, that's not going to help. So looking at a little bit more weight training and maybe looking at more sort of those more gentler forms of movement, taking up some Tai Chi or something like that is really good. There's a form of movement that I know one of our amazing team members, Gina Mace, who's in Tri Wellness, she's training to be an instructor in eccentrics, which is an amazing form of movement for women at midlife. Really amazing.
I'll have to have a look at that. I'm definitely in that phase right now where, as you say, like your body doesn't feel like your own. Where I've never been like I'm a small person in height, but I've always kind of been slim, I guess, except for when I was really, really ill, which was sadly the time when everyone was like, "Oh, you look great," and everyone came to me for weight loss coaching because I was a size 6. Besides for the fact that I was sick. But at my normal kind of weight, I'm like a size 10, bottom end 12 kind of deal. And I'm quite happy to be there. But I have definitely found, specifically over the last kind of year, that even though I haven't changed what I eat, and even though I haven't changed how I move, the weight is creeping up. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And immediately, you're right, Jess, the thought is I need to start like doing some running or, whatever, like drop what I'm eating, like lessen my intake. And thank God my actual health knowledge brain kicks in, and I have my beautiful husband who has so much information, and my brother and people around me who are like, no, stop. Let's not do that. Let's just, do a couple of other things. So we're trying to do yoga now and a few other things, because immediately you start pushing your body, and then give yourself tennis elbow, which I have done. Thanks very much. And, a few other things, because you just start overdoing things too quickly. And it's just not the right thing for your body right now. And it's interesting you say that, because I did feel like I was consciously going against what I wanted to do, which was more gentle movement. In my heart, that's what I felt I needed. But I was kind of like, I need to run. the way I fixed this ever before was running, and so no, it doesn't work like that now. So I'm glad that you have confirmed that for me.
And you shouldn't stop running if that's something you love doing, but just doing less of it, not daily or balance.
I don't love running. I don't. I think Jess likes running.
I love running. Yeah.
But I will run if I have a dog chasing me, or like I'm late for the bus. I will run. Or, like my child is in trouble. I'm sprinting, like a wounded gazelle. But running is not a thing that I'll do. But I'll do it like out of, I don't know, like I've got to fix this. I've got to fix it quick, because it doesn't feel like me. Also, I'm a cheapskate, and I'm not going to buy a whole new wardrobe. That's just not happening. So anyways, I'm glad you've kind of reaffirmed that for me. But
and that's just on that point, is that I think that's a really important point that you made, is what we used to do in our 20s and 30s is not going to work in your 40s and 50s and beyond.
Yeah.
And the whole, like, I'm not saying the calories in, calories out is, like, it's not entirely incorrect, but it's
a teeny bit.
Well, it is. It is in the sense that, like, it's the quality of the calories.
Yeah.
And, like, I often see women, they'll increase their cardio and working out, and they're completely torturing themselves and then starving themselves, or they start doing intermittent fasting or something like that, which is, there's lots of amazing science around that, but not necessarily for women at midlife. So I will, put a caveat there with that. But like, starving yourself and increasing is actually just going to put so much stress on your body. And if you're going through a hard time with menopause, emotionally, mentally, and physically, you don't want to torture yourself. You actually just want to, sometimes do less movement, slightly increase your nutrients and the quality of your nutrients, and it actually will work more effectively.
Yeah. Just love yourself, ladies.
Yes.
Give me a big hug. It's all going as it's meant to.
Yeah, and
don't be mad at it.
And that's a really important thing too, Yvette, is that you are going through a change. It is a significant change. Your body is changing. Like, I'm not saying, you can't lose weight and that you can't look after yourself. We want that for you. But your body is changing, and there needs to be an acceptance around that, and some self-love around it. And it's okay.
It's okay. I feel like I'll give me a little stroke on the shoulder. It's okay.
Yeah, give you a little bit.
So now that we go through, we have our day of menopause. Dun, da, da, da. And then
You have
what are
menopause
some
celebration parties.
Yeah, do a little party for that one. What are some of the challenges that women need to be aware of, kind of, post menopause, once we're through that?
Yeah. And that's another important reason why we really need to make some changes at midlife when we're going through that transition and really start giving back to ourselves and looking after ourselves, because insulin resistance, bone loss, muscle loss, cardiovascular, Alzheimer's and dementia, they're all going to be things we need to be aware of because our rates increase. And I say this not to scare people, because I'm always mindful not to, you don't want to be fear-mongering, which I see a lot of people do, and I don't agree with that. I think it's important we be aware that we become much higher risk factors, but that's why it's so important that we need to start making those modifications and start looking after ourselves.
Yeah. Totally agree. So good. Because exactly what you said, like my mom is terrified of getting Alzheimer's or dementia. And, she'll read one thing and she'll send it to me and she'll be like, oh my goodness, like it's just like, you're taking care of yourself. You're doing everything in your power right now. You're doing movement. She switched less running to the weights, and, she's eating really well and she's practicing meditation. It's like, you're doing all the things. Like, it doesn't mean that it's going to go away, but you're drastically reducing your risk.
Absolutely. Like only 25 to 30% of our health is genetically determined. So, that's 75 to 70% is through lifestyle factors, including diet. So, like, it's not a guarantee, but gee, we've got some pretty big odds of control, that we actually have so much more power and input over our longevity and our vitality. Like I always say, I want to focus on feeling good rather than just looking good. We all want to look good, of course, but if we focus more on the feeling good for as long as I possibly can, then I think that can really help shift the mindset to start looking after yourself in that way. Because as I said, 70 to 75% is really in your control.
Yeah.
So I think that when you can see it in that way, it's really important.
Yeah. Love it. I've learned so much. This has been so good. Thank you so much for all of this. If people want to find out more about like what you do, if they can work with you, menopause in general, can you share all your details with us?
Sure. So you can find me on social media. So I'm at Kerry, Kerry _ the grounded chick, and chick is CHIC, not with a K on the end. That's on Instagram. Or you can join, I've got a private group called Midlife to Menopause, where I just speak in specifically to that. And I'm always sharing little things. Sometimes I do little interviews or little lives just talking into a particular topic. And just any information I come along, I share into there. So that's a really great place to join. So that's called
on Facebook.
On Facebook. So that's, if you just search Midlife to Menopause, you'll see that, and you just obviously have to just join the group, and I'll let you in. And also, like as Yvette said at the start, I've developed a complementary program within Tribal Wellness Movement in our private support on that specific topic. But we've also done a webinar that if anybody wants to take a look at, then just obviously reach out to any of us and we can send that webinar through. So, I mean, it's just going to go into a little bit more information about what we've talked about today. So
yeah, it's a good hour. So if anybody is keen to get their hands on that webinar, feel free to just comment underneath the podcast on whatever platform you're on. Or, of course, we are on Facebook and YouTube. And so feel free just to comment on our page or wherever we are. And we keep an eye on that all the time. You can also obviously go onto our website, which is just www.thetransformationproject.net.au, and just put in the contact us section, and we'll certainly be able to get that to you and be able to get you in contact with Kerry or to send you any of the information. We're happy to do that.
And also too, I just wanted to add that in the menopause, in my private group, I've actually got a symptom checklist in there. So, because there's like up to 48 known symptoms that are possible. So it's really good. You can just download the PDF and just go through, and you might be surprised when you start ticking off and going, I had no idea. Oh, that's, this is all linked. So it just kind of makes you feel a little bit more empowered when you can link it to something and be a bit more aware around it.
Yeah.
All about empowerment.
Yes.
Fantastic. Kerry, thank you so much for joining us today. I have learned so much. I'm glad Jess has as well. Jess is going to be like the most prepared woman for stuff. And we hope that you are too. We hope that if you are going through perimenopause right now, that you are feeling more empowered, more in control, and more in love with yourself and the process. And wherever you are in the world, we hope you're having an absolutely incredible day. We will see you next time on the Transformation Project. Thank you for listening in to this episode of the Transformation Project. The Transformation Project is not just a podcast, we're also a community. We're a collective of like-minded people all around the world seeking to live their best life and raise each other up. We're looking to support you, set goals, get healthier, connect with yourself and others at a deeper level, and better understand yourself and the world around you. We're always looking to link arms with like-minded people wanting to create more out of life. You can connect with us via our website, which is www.thetransformationproject.net.au. Email us at support@thetransformationproject.net.au, or simply listen in to one of our podcast episodes, which can be found on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can even watch some of our episodes on our YouTube channel, simply called The Transformation Project. Please like and subscribe to make sure you hear all the incredible shows and guests we have lined up. If you have any feedback or any comment, we would love to hear those, as well as any ideas or guests that you think we should be interviewing in future. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Transformation Project.